Welcome back to Media 7. Now, complaints about the fortunes of science in the media are a perennial. But as major questions loom, there are signs that the Science's already modest media profile is receding. With me now are Peter Griffin, manager of the Science Media Centre, and Alan Sampson, who teaches at Massey and for his sins was the only print journalist to cover the Royal Commission on Genetic Modification. Welcome to you both. Peter, there is not one dedicated science reporter on a daily round in New Zealand in the news media. Does that make us unusual?
Yeah, you're dead right. We are unusual. It's a luxury when we actually come across a science reporter. They're all generalists in the media that cover science, but also cover other things. Some of them have to do shift work, so if they're on an evening shift, they have to go and chase an ambulance or something like that. There's not a single dedicated person in the mainstream New Zealand media covering science. Radio New Zealand has a science show and a dedicated science team of 2, but in terms of the press, the print media, where people get most of their news about science, there's no one on the game all the time. Yeah,
I mean, Alan, you've been covering these issues for a long time. Was it ever thus? Have we ever done it better?
We have done it better, but not markedly better. Science has always been treated pretty badly in this country. And a long time ago, there were columns in the old Sunday Times, and it was part of the Dominion. For as long as I worked, we had, I think there were 2 dedicated print journalists covering science in the country, and that was myself for the Dominion and Simon Collins for the Herald. And a lot of people see these as the good old days. I don't think things have slipped hugely beyond that. We don't have dedicated reporters for science now, but we do have reporters who do have a science interest and should be pushed more to do it. Whether they do it well is a different issue.
Why this lack? Is science just seen as too difficult or too arcane by editors?
I think it's simpler than that. I think it's seen as unsexy. And I think that's a terribly flawed view of the world.
How do we sex it up? That's part of your job, isn't it? To make it seem a bit more sexy and glossy, isn't it?
We are learning. We're 6 months into this. So we were set up by the government to address a market failure effectively. Science isn't being covered vigorously in the New Zealand press, so we were set up, like other science media centres around the world, to make it easier for general reporters to cover science well, to do the basics well. So we're finding that to do that, to get science into the front pages of the newspapers or onto TV shows, we have to sex it up, we have to package it, we have to time the delivery of it very well, we have to get buy-in from the editors, who are the people who make the call on what goes on TV or in the papers. Unless we do that, all you get is science pigeonholed in the back of the paper, wire stories, A8, A8, A9, A10, a glut of stories when they can't find enough stories to fill the rest of the paper.
Do you have to come up with what we in the media industry call talent? People who can talk well on camera.
Talent sells, people sell, good scientists sell, and it's hard to find scientists who want to talk to the media. A lot of them have been burnt by the media. A lot of them just simply won't go on TV shows because they're worried about what they'll look like to the public, but also to their peers. So part of our job is also making scientists comfortable and actually giving them a heads up on what they're going to face when they sit down on a couch with someone.
But isn't it more fundamental than this, really? Because we've got to convince editors that science can be news. And basically, news is news, in whatever discipline you're talking about. And if reporters can go out and find good science news, I think editors can be convinced to publish it. Yeah, exactly. And there is plenty of news and science out there.
Yeah. Now, as I said, you covered the Royal Commission on Genetic Modification. I thought that whole issue, at the time when it was the biggest issue, was particularly poorly covered. It seemed like no one was prepared to engage the science. It was talking head journalism. One lobby says this and one lobby says that.
There's a bit of background to that. It took an argument to get that covered on a daily basis for a start. They weren't going to, and we had to argue for it. The Dominion journalist myself was the only one who covered it for the entire 4 months, on the understanding that it was to be treated like a court. That you could
it's okay if you treat it like court, if you treat it like another form of reporting.
Yes, but you could not achieve balance on a given day. Therefore, you could achieve balance over the entire duration of the inquiry, and that it would even out in the long term. But it was a hell of a task, because you'd be sitting there all day, every day, and you had to scramble a news story through, giving a fair indication of what went on within an hour of getting back.
And the amazing thing about that, about 700 stories came out of the Royal Commission of Inquiry. About a third or more came from Alan. Some research recently showed that move on several years, genetic modification is still a huge issue for New Zealand, and we're still getting this ping-pong back and forth between interest groups and politicians, where the scientists are stuck in the middle. Some of them aren't even allowed to talk because they work for Crown Research Institutes. Those who want to talk don't get any play in the press.
Well, I wonder now as the economic squeeze goes on media companies, whether things are getting worse. Is that the case?
It's a global phenomenon. Basically, last December, CNN shut down its space science and environment unit. They want Anderson Cooper to be their face of science because he's the star, he's the guy who gets the eyeballs. And he does these documentaries, which are great because they personalise science and climate change and all that sort of thing. But they don't have any unit dedicated to this anymore. The ABC in Australia is cutting back its dedicated science coverage. This is happening all around the world. Science is being pushed into consumer reporting, health reporting, and current affairs.
I think there's a reality in what you say, that they're cutting back on dedicated science reporters. But there is still, as long as there's science news out there, they will cover it and they will publish it. So you're left with two things there. You've got to convince the editors that science can and is sexy, and you've got to prepare young reporters to go out and teach them how to find stories.
Is it a problem that editors will still let through opinion columnists in particular, who will address, well, there's probably the biggest scientific story that our generation faces, climate change, and clearly don't know the first thing about it? I mean,
absolutely true.
Is there a duty of responsibility to editors there? Because I've seen people in the Herald who really don't know what they're talking about, and they get a column opposite the editorial.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very hard to argue duty of responsibility to editors, of course. It's the news is news issue, isn't it? Climate change is a very difficult one for newspapers especially, because they often feel like it's been said 1,000 times. And you can almost see a visible groan go around a newsroom when the climate change issue comes up. And then you get into the tired old arguments of, do I have to go to another side? Do I have to, what am I going to say? What's new?
You get the potentially false equivalence trap, don't you? That you have to report each side equally.
I think climate change has been terribly covered in the New Zealand media, and you see it still now. You see a column from a climate change denier, effectively. And then the following week, because there's been an explosion in the preceding week and someone said, I want to write a reply, then you see someone who represents the consensus view, and it just goes on and on again. If you see these columns in isolation as a member of the public, what do you believe? Basically, you still think that the fundamental science is in dispute. That doesn't get us forward at all.
I wouldn't go quite as far as you in this, Peter. I think most newspapers and most mainstream news media leans towards the mainstream on this issue now, and I think you'll see far less anti-stories than you would have in the past. It has become reality.
Yeah, but you still do see, and I've spoken to editors, I've said, why did you run those two completely opposed columns? And they say, well, look, you may not like it, but that got a lot of letters to the editor, that got a lot of discussion going. We think it's a good thing because of that.
What are the other stories that we, particularly in New Zealand, should be hearing about? And what are the other big science stories for us that we don't hear?
Oh, there are lots of big science stories out there. Superconductivity, what's happened in that? No one's checked on that for a year or two.
I haven't seen it on the front pages, no.
The implications. Yeah, exactly.
Why should we hear about that? Why should we hear about superconductivity?
Well, if it's going to revolutionise the way energy is distributed to homes around this country at a far cheaper rate, surely that's a big issue. And New Zealand is leading the world, or amongst the leaders in the world in this issue. Nanotechnology. Incredible things going on in nanotechnology in this country. Hardly report at all.
Yeah, that's right. And we are a centre of excellence. We have the McDiarmid Institute in nanotechnology. Genetic research, we're a centre of excellence in. We do some things really good in terms of science reporting in New Zealand. We're really good on earth science, we're really good on conservation, and we're really good on agriculture. We have the best scientists in the world, and those subjects do get a fair bit of cover, and the universities and the CRIs help out there. But there are swathes of science that only get covered in wire stories, and it's a real shame.
You're right.
Do either of you have formal scientific qualifications? Because that is the rule in America. If you're going to report on science, you need a science degree. Yeah. Neither of you do.
No. I'm a journalist by trade, and but I fundamentally believe that a person with a good grounding in journalism can cover any story, including a science story.
That's the journalism edict, isn't it? That if you're interested in a story, and the skill is to be able to approach it and translate it for the layperson. And I believe that's possible with science also.
So, it always puzzles me that we have journalists prepared to approach deeply arcane topics like economics. Yes. No shortage of those, but we don't seem to have people willing to approach science.
Yeah,
I think we have people willing to approach science. I don't think the space is given to them to perform that role.
Yeah. I don't think it's all bad. As Alan says, when science is covered now, it's quite likely to get on the front page because it's treated as a general story. It's not treated as a science story and pigeonholed anymore. And I do see light at the end of the tunnel in the form of the internet and the acres of space it allows scientists to go direct to the public through blogs. And organisations like the Public Library of Science, which is putting its research for free on the internet for the public to read. And
you've got things like scienceblogs.org, which, surprise, surprise, scientists can actually write quite well.
And it gets millions of hits every month.
Yeah. Is it sad that some of the most prominent mainstream newspaper scientists, science writers I know of, are people like Ben Goldacre, who on The Guardian, who seems to spend his entire time debunking bad science. It's like, should we maybe be able to get on to writing about good science?
Yeah, exactly. Name me someone who in the New Zealand press consistently every week is churning out columns or news stories and is a respected science reporter. They just don't exist. The reporters we deal with on a day-to-day basis, they want to do a good job. They're good journalists, but they're not given the opportunities to spend the time that is going to allow them to turn out really good work.
It's true. And the mainstream columnists we do have are often churning out quirky stories, aren't they? Like Brocky, who is a very good scientist himself. Yeah. But what he's writing is borders on the trivial often.
Yeah, new insights about your brain. Well, hopefully things will improve. Now, staying with the wisdom of geeks, Simon Pound joined me at an unusual event in Warkworth last weekend.
Last weekend, an hour north of Auckland, through the new tunnel in Warkworth, a gathering of leading-edge technology innovators, makers and shakers met for Foo Camp. It's not your usual corporate get-together. It's held in a school. Some attendees stay in tents. In fact, they call it an unconference. Foo is all about ideas. Let's meet some of the guests. Daniel Spector, print-on-demand innovator.
It's made by people who actually like books.
Joel Pitt, who is 26 and has a PhD.
The time that I used to have available for gaming is rapidly diminishing.
Annalie Newitz, sci-fi blogger.
Yep, blogging is my full-time job.
Damien Conway, mouth for hire.
The great thing about Foo Camp is that you finally get together physically with your own tribe.
Tom Coates, pioneer blogger.
This idea of navigation in a world of massive excess, and it's all surfaced around data.
And Vic Oliver of Catalyst IT.
A RepRap. Well, the name means replicating rapid prototyper, but it's basically a 3D printer. Instead of printing flat images on paper, it prints things that have some height to it.
Vic was a hit at the conference. Like Batman, he had the best toys. His electric car.
It is the real deal. Not exactly street legal, I'm afraid.
And his RepRap.
If you're familiar with the hot and cold ends of a soldering iron, and you can drill holes in things without creating too much blood, then you're in with a fair chance of putting one of these things together.
He even has awesome tattoos.
It's a tattoo of the moon with the Apollo landing sites marked on it in ultraviolet tattoo ink.
Right. Well, if Foo Camp was about just one thing...
It's an environment where many geeks can just let their head out and just be geek. They don't have to worry about the social norms. They don't have to worry about, is the person I'm talking to going to understand this technical stuff that I'm on about? They're dealing with people who are their peers.
It's getting the hot idea injection.
Some of what went on seemed a little science fiction, like Joel's job.
Basically, it's a system for trying to create sort of strong, true AI, and how we can ensure that these smaller than human intelligences will be friendly to humans.
Huh? He just pretty much said he's working to help make our new artificial intelligence overlords so that they will be nice to us humans. which is pretty much Terminator 2, but for real. People come to Foo for the diverse knowledge on offer. Stuff like this.
The speed of desktop computers within the next 10 to 15 years is going to get comparable to the amount of processing that goes on in the human brain.
Readers are going more and more toward getting their information online, particularly people who like popular culture.
One of my missions generally is uncovering data from the world and from people, particularly at the moment, and giving them control over it so that they can do stuff with it.
New Zealand authors get to see themselves in print more often because of the availability of this technology.
We're seeing people of the age of young teenagers becoming certified in technologies that you used to have to be like 30 to get certified in, and not even thinking about it.
And that's what it's all about. Great ideas like those and more. More than we can fit on TV anyway. If you'd like to learn about them, head to the Media 7 blog for the full interviews conducted by intrepid reporter Russell Brown. Until then, get in there, us.
Good on you. It works. Well done, sir. Simon Pound with that report, and yeah, it was quite a nice drop. Peter, you were at Foo Camp. What was your takeaway?
It completely resurrected my belief that we have an amazing, innovative scene in New Zealand. A lot of the companies that I covered as a tech reporter on the Herald are dead now, they're defunct. And I've been worried, especially with all this doom and gloom, about how the little ones are going to survive, but there are companies there that have big ideas and are going to go big on the world stage.
Well, thanks for letting us end a gloomy program on a cheery note. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
And that is our show on the old-fashioned television. Thank you to our economic panellists also, Bernard Hickey, Tim Watkin and Liam Dan, and thank you for watching. We'll be back with Media 7 at the same time next week. Until then, goodbye.